Yellowjackets is one of those few productions where it can split the time between two different time periods, 25 years apart to be specific. And it doesn't have it where one side feels better than the other, or else, like a lot of Showtime stars or HBO programs, where you feel like sex and violence is compensating for a story or lack of character development. So, just to give you a brief overview, the show takes place in 1996 going into 1997, as well as 2021. In 1996/1997, we'll focus on the Wisconsin, New Jersey girls Yellow Jacket soccer team. On this team, we have Jackie, who is the head of the team, not because she's the most talented, but because she's influential, according to their coach. We have Shauna, who's her best friend, who is having sex with her off and on boyfriend, Jeff, as in Shauna's having sex with Jackie's off and off boyfriend since I think she said freshman year. We have Tasia, who is the only person of color on the team. She's biracial, black mom, white dad. There is Allie, who's a freshman who Tasia doesn't like, and even clips her in a way that makes her shin pop out through the skin. So, let you know something about her. We also have Van, who's the goalie. We have Laura Lee, who's very religious. Natalie, who is kind of the edgy punk type, listens to Marilyn Manson, hangs out with the outcasts. But when it comes to the group, she mostly gets along with everybody, but her and Tasia definitely don't see eye to eye when it comes to Allie. And lastly, there is Misty, who is some kind of assistant to the coach, and then Charlotte. These girls were supposed to go to nationals in Seattle, minus Allie, who got injured. But on the way there, the plane that Charlotte's father got them went down before they got to Seattle. And for about, I think it's 19 months, something like that, they were trapped in the wilderness. While trapped in the wilderness, it went from them just trying to survive to kind of getting into this weird cult like thing where they're dressed up in weird attire, killing each other, and also feeding on one another. So expect some cannibalism. Now, the first episode doesn't go heavily into what happened after the plane crash. It just lets you know what happened and gives you scenes of some of the things the girls did, which is why it is so secretive 25 years later in 2021. Now, in 2021, the way things are set up, you do not see Jackie, you do not see Laura Lee, you do not see Charlotte. You also do not see Van. What you do see is Shauna, who is a mother who apparently married Jeff and has one daughter with him. Tasia is called the queer Kamala Harris. Kamala. I don't hear her name often enough anymore to remember how to say it. Anyway, she's supposed to be the queer version of our vice president, who has a wife and also a son. Whether or not the son is biologically his, adopted, doesn't really matter. But alongside that, we have Natalie, who has been, rather, in and out of rehab for drugs, alcohol, and possibly sex addiction. I'm not sure, but it's made very clear that Natalie does use sex to try to deal with her trauma, get away with it, get away from it, what have you. And lastly, we have Misty, who has become a nurse. These ladies in 2021 together do not talk about what happened in 96/97. That is something they don't talk about. They barely talk to each other unless they have to. However, a woman named Jessica, who works for the not the New York Times, who works for the Star Ledger, has been poking and prodding, talking to different people in the town, and now tries to talk Shauna up in order to get a book deal so that this story could be told. Now, the reason why this book deal and all of these questions might be asked is because Tasia is running for state senator of New Jersey. So that could very well be why people are snooping around, because originally the agreement was all the girls on the soccer team are going to keep a low profile, but Tasia is now like pushing us up to the forefront, and this is starting to dig up old stories and rumors because people know something fucked went down, but they can't prove it because none of the girls have talked. But With Natalie getting out of rehab and her having some type of idea that she has something to do, it seems between Jessica asking questions, Tasia's political ambitions, and Natalie getting out, the quiet, sort of peaceful life that Shauna has tried to build for herself is about to implode. So, highlights. As noted in the overview, this is one of those few programs where you can definitely say the younger versions and the modern versions definitely on equal pairing. Usually, the younger versions are just background information or something similar to set up the modern uh, day people, or else it'd be like when it comes to a lot of 90s romance films, in my opinion, where you get the kind of situation where the younger versions are so much more interesting than the older versions. So you kind of have an imbalance. But when it comes to this show, Yellow Jackets doesn't have that. You're just as much interested in wondering what the hell happened in 96 to 97 as much as you are the adults who somehow survived that plane crash. For whether it's the fact that Shauna killed a bunny the way she did with in cold blood, or the fact that Tasia, when in 96, she wasn't really freaking out about what she did to Allie. It kind of shows you that the girls and now women, they got issues, and seeing those issues unravel as we see what happened after the plane crash or how they handled scrutiny in modern day is definitely going to keep you watching. And I would even add on the mystery element of what happened in the woods is also very appealing. Because just because we haven't seen Jackie, Van, Laura Lee, and Charlotte, it doesn't mean that they're dead. As Shauna made clear, the girls, ladies, women, you know what I mean, they don't all talk to each other or see each other that often. Like when it comes to this episode, Natalie goes to see Misty, but it's not clear why because it doesn't seem like Misty and Natalie were friends back in 96. And as for Shauna contacting Tasia, again, there is no sign in 96 that those two were friends. They were on the same team, but it doesn't, we don't know how over a 25-year period that became the main person he would talk to when something was going down about what happened in the past. So, with that in mind, it brings you to question what happened out in the wilderness when it came to these people. Because right now, the only one we know for sure definitely was doing some kind of screwed up was Misty, because she's the only one who reveals her face during the 96 period when it comes to post plane crash. So, figuring out who did what, who's the one that decided, hey, we're going to have to kill people to eat and survive, that is definitely a strong element of this production. But perhaps the real selling point here is it doesn't overly rely on sex or violence in order to get the point across. It's very much a story about character development story, which just so happens to have sexual content and violence because one, we're dealing talking about teenagers and adults who have sexual desires. And two, violence is pretty much required for them to survive in the wilderness, for whether it's the case of Shauna being able to mentally go to a place where she can just kill a bunny that's eating from a garden in 2021, or the girl setting up a trap to kill up to kill another girl in order to have some type of food. There has to be violence. And in terms of sex, it's nothing like nobody's shirts coming off, no bras are coming off. You don't see some dude's bare behind. It's just not even softcore, it's just implied. And I appreciate that because far too often with these premium stations, it's like we're going to compensate for the fact that we solely put money into star power with showing you bare bodies. Or else, the case of, yes, the storyline isn't great, but look at all these graphic sex or violent scenes. The big selling point when it comes to Yellow Jackets is the fact that it's not overly reliant on sex or violence, but rather it wants to focus on the characters and story. This is as opposed to shows that you may see on HBO, Stars, or other shows on Showtime, which heavily rely on violence and sexual content, oftentimes to compensate for something. Whether it's for a storyline that's kind of weak, or else characters who only are interesting because of what they do and what they say, not because of who they are as a person, if that makes any sense. But with Yellow Jackets, as much as you see that it recognizes sex and violence as necessary to show the human experience and to show why these women are have various traumas. It never becomes a selling point of the show. The selling point is how do these women become this way? How are they handling it now? And how much of that has become part of the person and how much of that was just so that they can survive? Because, like, for example, Misty, if you watch Christina Ricci's interview with Whitney Cummings, she paints the picture that Misty may have always had some little in her head, but at the same time, she lives in regular society, so there are no outlets, no opportunities to really show that twisted side of her without, ending up in jail, psychiatric facilities, things like that. So there really is this need to wonder when it comes to what the girls did in the woods, why did they do that? Why did they pick that specific method? And when it comes to present day, how are they processing that? And did they just bury that deep inside, or do they look for ways to kind of tap into who they were at one time? Like Shauna killing a rabbit, could that be her outlet of like tapping into that person she discovered back when they were trapped in the wilderness? When it comes to Misty, again, was that person in the wilderness who she really was, as Richie kind of implies, or was that just who she needed to be in order to make it out of a bad situation? Or, as Richie also made it seem, like, was her being the one willing to go that far, how she felt a sense of belonging within a group that often made her feel ostracized? All of this all of these questions are what draws you in because it's not questions about who's going to die next, who's going to have sex with who, or something like that, or how is it going to look, but it's like questions about characters and what they're thinking, what they're going to be doing, and how they're going to interact with each other, which over the long term makes it so, as I said in the beginning or during one of the many cuts of this section, you're focused on characters and stories and not the superficial stuff that, whether it's sex or violence, you can easily grow a tolerance to. Yellow Jackets may be one of the few shows we will recommend this year. For when it comes to the premium stations like HBO, Showtime, Stars, or even streaming platforms like Netflix, Hulu, or Amazon Prime, there is this sense that more often than not, they want to go for the sensational more than the substance. Yellow Jackets flips that, and while it does have sensational moments, it doesn't use that as a crutch for its entire premise. You don't have to see teens or adults having sex all the time. You don't have to see the most graphic violence, even though it exists in the various situations. Even though it exists, it's not something that the show feels that it needs to make into its core marketing in order to get viewers. Instead, it feels like it trusts and relies on the actors to tell a story and to build these characters that hook its audience. And that feels so rare nowadays that I cannot help but think that this is going to be probably one of Showtime's new flagship shows.